All right, yesterday we had a rather somber lesson looking at pollution, looking at smog and all the other fun stuff. I hope today will be much more encouraging. And I believe it's the last day of our chapter, so let's get started. Remember that pollution is anything added to the environment that harms it. So let's go from there. Some of the sources that we looked at pollution yesterday. We looked at air pollution and water pollution and land pollution. Well, where's this all come from? And we mentioned yesterday a lot of it is from trash and things that we throw out. But there are other sources of pollution, and these are sources of air pollution. Metallurgy, chemical industry, building materials, all of those are involved with factories and the pollutants that the factories put out. One of the reasons why we have factories is to make stuff that we use. So do we need factories? Yeah, absolutely. Can we figure out a way to decrease the amount of pollution that's coming from those factories? Or can we decrease how much they have to make over and over again? One of the other sources is transportation, and we saw the car exhaust, and we talked about the pollution that's going down. We talked about the oil that could be leaking from cars that would be polluting the land and then going down and polluting the water. We also talked about producing energy, or maybe we didn't talk about it, but let's talk about that for right now. You use electric lights, you use computers, you use all sorts of electrical components. All of those need electricity. But where's the electricity come from? The electricity comes from power plants. Power plants have to generate electricity and then send it out to your house. Well, how do the power plants do that? Well, by burning fossil fuels and turning the generators in order for them to create the electricity. But it's that burning the fossil fuels that's an issue. The more electricity we use, the more fossil fuels are used. The more fossil fuels are used, the more there's pollution. And the more there's pollution, there's more damage to the ecosystem. So you can see how all of these are starting to meld together. So what does all of this matter? We've been studying ecosystems. We've studied how all the abiotic and the biotic communities are involved together, that they all rely on each other. We've looked at food webs, we've looked at energy use, we've taken things out of food webs and seen what has happened if we take an organism out. We've done a lot of that stuff. This is something that pollution does. Number one, it pollutes the soil. Now the soil has nutrients in it. If the soil is polluted, those nutrients no longer can get into the producers, the plants. So if the plants aren't getting the nutrients that they need, what happens to them? They decrease in how many plants you can have. Well, what does that do to the food chain? We know that the producers are at the bottom of the food chain, so that disrupts that entire food chain. Another thing that pollution in the air and pollution in the water and pollution on the land can do is decrease the ability of plants to photosynthesize. Again, think about what we learned already, how the balance of these ecosystems is so important, how each niche has to be filled with organisms doing their part. If the photosynthesis stops, the producers no longer are doing that part. What does that do to the ecosystem? And we already mentioned the destruction of food chains. How about disease and death? Ooh, nasty topics. We saw yesterday that 1 in 8 deaths is caused simply by air pollution. But there are so many other pollutions that are out there, not just air pollution. There's pollution of the soil, there's pollution of the water, there's pollution of the environment that are causing not only death and disease in humans, and that's a terrible thing, but also in the animal population and in the plant population. So if you have diseased animals that can no longer fill their niche, if you have prey that is wiped out by a disease, what does that do to the predators? What does that do to the ecosystem? And acid rain is another one that is a nasty thing that comes again from air pollution. The air pollution touches leaves and it wears away the cuticles, the outside layer of the leaves, and because it's acid. And when it does that, it allows the bugs to get into the leaves and allows them to attack those leaves and destroy the tree. We have vast forests up in the Adirondacks that are bare of any leaves because the acid rain up there has destroyed them. We also have lakes up in the Adirondacks that have no fish in them because of acid rain. Fish lay their eggs in the water, but the acid, the acidicness of the acid rain actually dissolves the covering of the fish eggs and destroys them. So is this an issue? Yeah, it's a big issue. And it's going to take hard work to solve it. But it doesn't need you to solve this issue as an adult, although it does. What do I mean by that? I mean, right now, you're saying, I'm a kid. What do I care? Why is this important to me? It is really important to you when you figure that the ecosystems provide our food, they provide our shelter, they provide our water, they provide all the things that we also need to live. So while you don't need to solve the issues right now of factories burning fuel or cars, because I don't think any of you own a car, you will in the future. So it's something you have to have in your mind. But can you affect factories right now? As a kid? Yeah, you actually can. Now this isn't a thing that's going to just magically disappear. As Colin Powell says, it's going to take hard work. It's going to take trying to figure out how to do this. So let's end on a positive note and look at the things that we can do right now that will help the solution. Will it fix everything? No. And I want to tell you a story. It's a story I've heard often. There's a man that came up to another man, and he was on the beach, and he was throwing something into the water. And he couldn't figure out what the guy was doing, So he went down, and he saw that a storm had caused a whole bunch of sea stars or starfish to be on the beach, and they were dying. And the man was down there picking up starfish and throwing them back into the ocean. Well, the first man kind of laughed and he says, you can't do this. You can't throw all these starfish into the ocean before they die. It doesn't matter. You might as well just give up. And the man just kept throwing starfish. He says, it doesn't matter. And the man picked up a starfish and he looked at it and he says, yeah, but it matters to this one. And he threw the starfish in. What was he trying to say? He was saying we can't look at a huge big problem and say, oh, there's nothing we can do. Because everything that we can do, if all 7 billion of us on this earth did, we would make massive changes. So let's see some of these changes we can do. We're going to come to these 5 words over and over again. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. And I only gave you 4 spaces, but what I'd like you to do is write these words and maybe write a 5th space too, so we can have the 5th word on there. And then as we talk about these things and talk about examples, write some of the examples that we come down with on these notes, on your notes of what we can do as we go through these next few slides. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. And they all intermingle with each other, so sometimes we're going to talk about one, then be talking about the other at the same time. One of the things that we need to know is that when we use plastic products, they do not decompose. They last forever. And this slide shows you how much time all of these things last. Now, if these get into the environment, we've already seen the pollution that they can cause. So one of the things that we can do, no matter what age you are, is to try and figure out a way that we don't put more of these into the environment. And how do we do that? By using them. So what could you use instead of getting one of the plastic bottles? What could you use to drink your water every day? The stores in New York are already canceling out the plastic bags. It takes 20 years for them to dissolve. Your parents now are using bags that are reusable. Why? Because we're trying to keep plastic out of the environment. Same thing with using plastic spoons and plastic straws and coffee cups. Or could you grab a glass? Could you grab a mug? Can you keep things in Tupperware as opposed to a plastic baggie? What sorts of things could you refuse to use anymore so that they would no longer go into the environment? That's something you can do now. Do you litter? Do you throw things on the ground? Again, we've talked about how all the chemicals in the garbage and the pollutants in the garbage can get into the ecosystems. We've seen pictures of animals caught in some of this. What can you do? How about don't litter? Don't throw things on the ground. Don't throw things where they don't belong. Or could you even go further? There are people that organize trips to the beach and trips to places, and they actually clean it up. They clean up other people's junk so that the ecosystems aren't affected. Why should we care? Well, God made us the managers of this earth. It's our job. It's our job to show love to others. It's our job to care for people. Are we caring for people by doing this? Sure. We're keeping disease and death away. Reusing things, and I already mentioned the grocery bags, but how about when you have a water bottle that's no longer useful for a water bottle? Could you use it for something else? Could you keep your pencils in it? Could you keep your treasures in it? What could you reuse that bottle for? Think about that before you throw things into the trash can. When you get something from Amazon and you have a box, can you flatten that box and then use it to mail something else out? What can you reuse? What can you give a new life to? And that brings up the subject of Salvation Army. I love going to Salvation Army. It's a great place to shop. It's where people who have donated their clothes or toys they no longer play with, or things that are from their house that they never use, they've donated it away. It's a fantastic place for people who don't have as much money to spend on new things. They can go there and they can purchase things. It's a great place for anybody to go. And why do I feel like I can go even though I have enough money to buy new clothes? Because when I buy clothes from Salvation Army, the money I use there goes to help others that are going through floods, going through fire. Maybe somebody's house burned down. Salvation Army will gather all sorts of stuff to take to them, to give them and supply the needs. So by not only buying things at Salvation Army or by donating things I no longer use, I'm keeping those things out of the environment. I'm keeping those things from going into landfills and being trashed. And I'm also helping people around here. Recycling is a huge thing we can do. I have this picture on the left side showing you things that using recycling water bottles can be changed into. They can be changed into mats that you have on the ground. They can be changed into sneakers, into clothing, into playground equipment. Instead of polluting and winding up being crushed and causing damage to our environments, they can be used again. Being a manager. So cans and bottles, and I already mentioned clothes and plastics, all of those things are things that you and I can do now as we try and manage God's creation. This is where the rock comes in. Did you know that your grass actually will grow better if you leave the grass clippings on the grass and allow them to decompose back into your lawn? The grass clippings have nutrients in them, and that nutrients goes right back into the soil. It's a natural fertilizer. So do leaves, and so does fruits and vegetables and things like that you are ready to throw out. Egg cartons, or not cartons, but egg shells. You can make a compost pile. All the nutrients that are still locked away in those plants can be put back into the soil. Makes great soil for your garden if you do this. These are simple little things that we can do. Planting trees, just recently, the internet has exploded with all sorts of different groups trying to see who can plant the most trees. The last one I saw was like over 1 million trees. Just incredible. I think it was 1.5 million trees that one of the YouTubers and his followers planted. It was just incredible. Why are they doing that? Because trees can hold the soil. Trees enhance the ecosystems. Trees provide oxygen for us. Trees provide the materials we need to build our houses. And by recycling these trees, by using old trees but planting new trees, we are managing God's creation. So we've come to the end of our ecosystem chapter. We started out looking at what makes an ecosystem, and we ended up with the part of why do we do what we do as managers to make those ecosystems the best that they can be. We're at the end of our chapter. We have a test to come up. And since this is Friday, we are not going to have our test today. But what you do have is you have a vocabulary list that you can finish filling out all of the words on the vocabulary list. That would go all the way to 40. I'd like you to fill them all out, and I would like you to do that as soon as possible today. Because what I want you to do is I want you to send them. Finally, you're sending your vocab list. I want you to send the whole vocab list to me. And I'm going to check it to make sure that you have all the correct vocabulary there, that you've found the correct definitions. Because you can use that over the weekend and on Monday to study for your test. I am going to give you your test on Monday, but you have the choice of taking it in the afternoon if you like. So you could study Monday morning and then take the test in the afternoon. When we do take the test, this is not an open book test. This is a test that you need to be on your honor, that you are not going to look at any other resource, but you are going to take the test just like we do in school. That is on your honor, but I'm letting you know now, it is not an open book test. So finish your vocabulary words, send them to me, and I will send them right back to you. That's why I'm going to return them to you, so that you know what the grade is and you know if there's any errors. I won't send them back if you got 100 on them. But if you had any missing, I will send them back so you can see which one is missing. And you can study those, and we'll have a test on Monday. All right, guys, have a great day.